stabbed with a ceremonial knife by Vickrum Digwa in Southampton. The case, of course, sparked protest and claims of two-tier policing, and now the Solicitor General has referred the 21-year sentence to the Court of Appeal for being too lenient. Let's speak with Chris Daw KC, barrister, writer and broadcaster. Afternoon to you, Chris. Now, look, I know you've got very set views on prison and whether you believe it to be the right approach, the wrong approach. I know sometimes you think it's the only approach as well. But where do you sit with this one? Because this was a barbaric act. All murders are. This was acute, it was horrendous, and of course, sadly, we saw the imagery of poor Henry dying on that body cam footage. 21 years was the sentence given. Could have been a longer sentence. And now the Solicitor General is looking to increase it. Your thoughts?
Well, my first thoughts, as always, when I'm dealing with a case of this kind, is for the victim and his family, Henry Nowak and his family, who, of course, no matter what happens in the legal process, are not going to ever see him again. And that, I think, is something that all of us who have ever worked in murder trials, particularly when the victims are young people, we always pause and reflect on the fact that we are involved in a criminal process. There is a trial, there is a sentence, but none of it, doesn't matter what we do, none of it is going to bring the victim back. So the question then, if you can't do that, which is what, of course, everyone would wish very much to be able to do, if you can't do that, what do you do with a 23-year-old who's committed a crime like this? So at 23, not quite at the level of full adult maturity, psychologically, emotionally, and so forth. So the question is, 21 years, he's been an adult for 5 years, and you add on 21 years, that represents that will be 80% of his adult life at the point that he's eligible even to apply for parole. I think that's enough.
The Solicitor General getting into this. Now, what do you make of that? Of course, it wouldn't be the first time we've heard government departments, get animated about things and those sort of facets of the legal system that think that, a case should be challenged or a sentence should be challenged. And in fact, one I think can reasonably argue, Chris, even if you agree with the prison sentence, the principle of being able to challenge things is all part and parcel of our legal process, etc. In this particular case, what do you sense about this challenge?
Well, so the Attorney General and the Solicitor General, who are the law officers of the Crown, have always, or for very many years at least, have had the right to appeal against a sentence which they consider to be unduly lenient. And that doesn't mean just too low. It has to be so far off of the sentencing guidelines that the Court of Appeal thinks the judge has got it totally wrong. Now, how you can call 21 years as a minimum term, as I say, I repeat, he won't get out after that unless he's eligible for parole. He could be in for 25, 30, 35, or the rest of his life if he doesn't qualify for parole. So it's a minimum term. My concern, Ian, with this and a number of other cases recently, is that this is not the Attorney General acting as an independent law officer. It's the Attorney General acting as a political minister and someone who wants to kind of, appear tough on crime to the public. And really, that's not what the law officers are for. And that, for me, is why it's wrong. But in the end, as you say, the Court of Appeal will consider. My view is they are unlikely to interfere with this sentence. And if they do, it will be by a very small amount. So, as I say, my thoughts are first and foremost with Henry Nowak's family. And once again, the legal system isn't going to sadly solve the problem of knife crime on our streets.
Can we not just make murder a mandatory life sentence, no parole?
Well, you could, and there are many parts of the world where that's the case, particularly the United States, where many states and at federal level, life without parole for murder, and indeed for many other crimes, is the norm. And you can have a society like that, and we would need not the roughly 90,000 prison places we have now, but probably more like 200,000 places. And if the taxpayers of this country are willing to pay for that, and that's what they want, then through the ballot box, they can vote for it.
Why would we need 200,000 places? Are there that many people that have committed murder that
no, it's not so much that. It's just that one assumes that that's not going to be the only change. If you're going to have life without parole for murder, the consequence, of course, is that every single murderer is going to be in for the rest of their lives. And the consequence for, say, an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 23-year-old is that they may be in prison for 80 years. And 80 years in today's money costs £4 million. And, of course, over time will be much more than that. So that's why I'm saying if we want to do that, fine, but we're going to find £4 million to keep someone locked up till they're 100.
When we get, I'm looking at another case here, this horrendous case of the father, adoptive father, who murdered the baby that he was meant to be looking after. There is a case where the public outrage, for different reasons, but equally as valid and powerful as Henry's death and others. But of course, when it's a baby we're talking about, something resonates very differently with us. The vulnerability, the fact that the victim in this case, little Preston, there was never a possibility, there was no comeback, there's never a possibility that you could defend yourself. That is it. A case such as that, people look at a story that we're all familiar with. I'd never run over the details. I don't even want to read the details myself. I know you as a lawyer have to go over those details in lots of different cases over the course of your career. But when it comes to something like this, I mean, what is an adequate sentence for somebody who's committed a murder of this nature? I mean,
well, an adequate sentence is one that protects the public from the person, and particularly protects children. So that will mean a lengthy period in prison. But it's also one which offers some degree of possibility of rehabilitation at some point, but only if the person is no longer a danger to the public. And people who kill babies, and you're right, Ian, I'm sad to say I've been involved in cases where I've had to look at photographs of toddlers' bodies that have, when they've been killed with cigarette burns, and just extraordinary, graphic and horrible things which I wish I'd never seen and stay in my mind for decades, if not even longer. But as lawyers, we can't act, and as judges and as sentencing judges and court of appeal judges, if we let our emotion dictate the outcome of a case or dictate the sentence, then really it's no longer justice. And so I say you have to look at protect the public first and foremost, particularly from murderers. But after that, you need to spend the minimum amount of money and the minimum amount of time to get that person through whatever it is that's caused them to be so awfully violent and to commit such terrible crimes, so that in some way, shape or form, if possible, they can rejoin society. And if you don't have that principle in the justice system, as I say, build your prisons, build 3, 4, 5 times as many as we have now, fill them with people, see what happens to society. And I'll tell you what happens, Ian, as we know from every other country that's done the same thing. Crime rates, murder rates, all of those things simply go up and up and up. They don't go down.
But you couldn't look at a story such as this, Chris, and say that is somebody who's got to go to jail surely for the rest of time. I mean, the unspeakable nature of these crimes, the torture, the sexual abuse.
No, because if that were the case,
you want to rehabilitate this man?
No,
Chris?
no, it's a principle, Ian. So let's think about it this way. By that definition, every act of sexual violence or even minor sexual touching of a child is so awful to the vast majority of us that find it so morally repugnant and so awful and so damaging to the child that if you follow the logic through, it doesn't matter whether you kill them or you don't kill them, all of those people should be locked away forever. And as I say, that's an argument you can make, but what you can't do is say, well, we're just a few people because they've been in the headlines and everyone's really angry about them, we'll lock them up forever. But the rest, actually, that people are not that interested in will kind of, well, we're not so bothered about that. That's why you have to be consistent, and that's why you have to do things for a reason. And the reason shouldn't just be gut feeling, anger, the desire for revenge, because that's the difference between a civilized society and an uncivilized society, is that we don't just act out of sort of a desire for revenge at all costs, no matter what. We act out of some degree of rational assessment of risk management and rehabilitation and the possibility, let's face it, of redemption, which exists for everyone. And if it exists in 5 years, it may not be for 30 years that it exists for some people. But when it comes, there has to be within our system the possibility of some sort of redemption, save for those who remain violent forever and can never be trusted in society. And I 100% agree that any such person has to remain behind bars.
So child murder, though, could be sort of separated in terms of its gravity due to the lack of defence that a victim was able to even go to, because they would have had none by dint of being a child. Would that not be? I mean, I've heard people make the case that paedophiles, or certainly paedophiles guilty of murder, would be, when people talk about the death penalty, for example, I know we're not talking about that here, but that would be an example of where they would say, OK, we're not going to kill every murderer for the reasons you've just given about the fabric and the intelligence of our legal system. It's sometimes hard to digest that, but I hear what you're saying, Chris. But with cases such as this, why not go for the death penalty? You know, this...
So defensive, so you just said because the victims are defenseless. Well, a 17-year-old may not be defenseless. An 85-year-old may be defenseless. The problem is, the minute you start creating some abstract reason why a particular category of case means that you have to have the death penalty or life without parole, is that I'll give you 57 other categories that pretty much roughly meet the same criteria, so you have to do it for them all. Otherwise, the whole principle, what difference does it make if a predatory paedophile abuses 20 kids or kills one? It makes no difference. The damage is extraordinary to all of those children. So you either choose that that's a crime as a society, which we vote, protects potentially a referendum. If that happens, so be it. But the consequence will not be lower crime. And that's where I don't argue these things because I have any affection for paedophiles, let alone child killers. Of course I don't. Nobody does. But I just look at the legal system and see it being driven so much by political and media narrative and not by a sense of any degree of pragmatism about how to reduce crime. Do we really want fewer Henry Nowaks? Or do we just want to make more of them? Because the more we just do this whole crackdown, lock people up forever mentality, people will then have to kill their way out of being arrested. Because if they get arrested, they're going away forever. And that happens all the time. It happens in America all the time. People shoot their way. They kill police officers because they're going to get life without parole or the death penalty. So you get more and more and more violence and more victims.
Why would you become a murderer to go into jail?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Why would you become a murderer, Chris? You're saying people are opting to go to jail?
No, I'm saying if someone's wanted for murder or robbery or one of the other many crimes in America which have a mandatory life sentence or a death penalty, people will kill police officers to avoid being arrested. They'll shoot them in the head because if they get arrested, it makes no difference whether they've killed 2 police officers because they're going away forever anyway, or they're getting the death penalty anyway. So when I've seen this in prison in this country, prisoners serving very long life sentences are willing to kill other prisoners, kill prison officers because they've got nothing left to live for. They've got no reason to behave themselves. They've got no reason to cooperate with anything because it's all been taken away. And if you want those people who are the most dangerous, the most violent, the most likely to kill, to become utterly kind of professionalized within the world of crime and potentially in prison for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, make it so. Make that happen. But it's not that any politician is being honest. They're not saying, if we double the sentences, if we send all of these people for life without parole, we're going to have lower crime. They're just saying the public want it, so we're going to do it. And that's where I'm sad to say that policy and the realities of how criminal justice really works are not aligned.
Chris, on that point, thank you, as ever. Chris Daw KC, the barrister, writer and broadcaster. Look, the death